This video will show you some prompts to get you started in creating a collage. So again, like always, there is a handout on Canvas, a Word document, that lists all of these instructions also, so definitely take a look at that. And again, as always, don't feel like you have to follow these instructions step by step. These are prompts to get you started, but you can always take your ideas in their own direction also. And I have some examples of some collages here that we'll talk about. But first, if you haven't already done so, please watch the video on compositional strategies first. Again, and I've said this in another video, I don't want you to worry too much about composition and planning, because our class, whether it's processes and structures or my early childhood class, the real focus is on process and looking at materials for what they can do to express different meanings, to tell stories, how can they engage our senses in different ways. But I do want you to watch that video on compositional strategies and make some effort to use some of those ideas, but again, without making those compositional strategies, without making that like get in your way too. Okay, so the first thing that I'd like you to do when you're thinking about making a collage, you can see these were not just made by, gluing pieces of paper, on a sheet of paper and calling it a day, right? Some of these have, pieces hanging off the edges. This one is even a little three-dimensional. This one is actually made up of a bunch of different papers glued together. So the first step that I really want you to think about is the surface or the substrate that you're working on. So you don't just want to take a piece of computer paper and just glue stuff to it. That's really not going to be a compelling piece to look at, and you're probably not going to have much fun making it either. So rather, I have some things here just to get you started in thinking about surfaces. Maybe you'll save some cardboard boxes that you have at home. You could either, cut this up and use the inside piece, the brown part, as your surface. I kind of think this could be a really fun surface to work on. It's breakfast essentials. You could really play with the wording, with the images. Another idea, maybe you have scrap old sheet music at home. These I have in my art ed room on campus. Old maps are also a great surface to work on. This is actually one of those plastic coated ones, but you could use an old map. If you have old books, the covers of books or the pages of books, this painting, right? You could cut this out and use that as the background or the surface that you're working on. Or if you've watched some of the other videos on painting and printmaking, use one of your works of art that you've made for another prompt, right? This could be a really interesting surface to create a collage on. So definitely think through what surface you'll work on. Again, for students in Art 119, take a look at pages 30 to 32 in our textbook. There's a whole section on backgrounds, and you could paint a specific painting just to have as your background for your collage. So there's different techniques here. That's pages 30 to 32. Also 84 to 95. It's a whole section on paper and different types of paper. You may even want to change the edges. Here they are burning the edges or tearing the edges of your paper, crumpling it up and flattening it out. And also on page 190 to 193, there are techniques for collage too. So definitely take a look at those sections. So after you have found an interesting surface to work on, next you want to gather some interesting papers and materials. And I'm just going to, I have this box here. Let me fix the lighting a little bit. I have a box here in the art room, and for those of you who are going to be teachers, you might want to start a box like this of your own. It's just weird things that you can use for collage items. This is the bag from Oranges. This netting is really interesting. Starbucks coffee cup warmer thing. Straws. There's like old bits of works of art. When students leave their works of art behind, they get put in bins like this. This is a plastic star. You might have had these in your bedroom. They glow in the dark. The floppy disks. I don't know why that's in there. That looks like trash. Tic Tac containers. All of these bits of paper, bits of fabric, the shower curtain ring. I think you get the idea, right? I love cardboard because cardboard is just super versatile. Bubble wrap, even ribbon, anything that you have. So that's step 3. Step 1 is to watch the video on compositional strategies. Step 2 is to find your surface. Step 3 is to gather a bunch of junk, like I just showed you. Again, I've mentioned this before. Do not use food items like beans, rice, pasta, things like that. We don't want to glue food down and use food as part of a collage. Okay, so once we have a variety of things, then you want to transform your materials in different ways. So let's say this is like a piece of mat board. I think it was originally for a frame. I don't want to just glue that down onto my surface. And on the handout that's on Canvas, I give you some ideas. Can you tear it, right? This is a super interesting little shape here now, right? This surface now would take watercolors really well because it's very cottony. If you're using cardboard, I could tear that apart and you get these really cool bumpy textures inside. Some other ideas, let me show you here. If you're using ribbons or wires, if you go in your parents' garage and you find some wires, can you knot them? And again, instead of just gluing a wire down, maybe you'll wrap them. Instead of just gluing some ribbon or yarn down, this person has braided it with a piece of twine. Again, instead of just gluing down a piece of cardboard, this person has woven in wire and thread. So, think of what you can do to your materials before you just apply them down. So this might be an activity that you do kind of more, over a period of time. Here's another example too. We did paper weaving in another video. This could be the surface that you work on for your collage. So again, I've cut up pieces of paper, woven them together. Now that's the collage. That's way more interesting than just using a piece of spiral notebook paper, right? Gluing some junk to it. not very fun and kind of not very interesting, you know, to look at in the end too. Okay, so once you have twisted or folded or cut up, you know, you've transformed your materials in different ways. Maybe your wires, you've woven up, you've done things to them. The next step would be to experiment with those compositional strategies that I mentioned in that earlier video. So let's just say I have a surface here. I'm going to use this as my surface to work on. And one of the first compositional strategies is overlapping. So I might just start playing. Like, I kind of don't like, this is kind of a very ordinary shape here, so let me grab some scissors. So I don't know, I feel like I have to transform that somehow. My suggestion too, don't just start gluing things immediately. Give yourself some time to play, right? So if I'm doing a compositional strategy about overlapping, I might overlap those two. But another really interesting compositional strategy is cropping or having things like hang over the edge. So maybe I might move that up and cut that off. I might also, let's see, if I use the star, right? Just gluing a star right in the center of your page. I don't know, not always so interesting. Maybe I can put it off center and overlap. Maybe I can rotate things, you know, at different angles. So they're kind of all rotating in. This is a fun piece of cellophane. It probably came from that candy container. So this doesn't look so great, but the point is, for this step, once you have gathered your surface, you've torn up and you've transformed your materials in some way, play around with the arrangement. I would even say, again, don't glue anything down. Leave it, walk away, come back in a day or two, move them around again, try out different compositional strategies before you start gluing. The other step 5 then, the other step in the process is to think about something that's unifying your collage. So some of the prompts that I give you on the handout that's on Canvas is to create a collage using any of the color schemes that you learned about in the color wheel lesson. Maybe you're going to do a collage with primary colors. So in that case, you know, primary, secondary, tertiary colors. So, you know, I would just gather those colors, things in those color schemes, right? The last step, as you're kind of deciding on how to place your items, think about a way that unifies it. So again, it could be a color scheme. You could create a monochromatic collage. So in that case, monochromatic means one color. So in that case, I'll show you. Let's see if I have an example here. If I were to use, I want to show you this super cool surface. If you want to get super fancy, this is in the art room, and it's a piece of slate. I could create a monochromatic collage on this surface. So everything that I adhere to it would be either black or gray or white. So basically, you know, in one general color scheme. Just pay attention to, on a side note, if you do use stone or wood as your surface, you will probably need to experiment with different types of glues. Another idea is to create a texture collage using materials only with really interesting textures. Another idea that I have is to create a collage using a repeated element. So in this example, you know, we're repeating this element of these long rectangular strips. Maybe you repeat only circles. Maybe your collage will be only circles. Another idea that's on our list here is instead of gluing the collage elements, you could sew them down. You could also, instead of gluing, use tape. This is a collage that's just made out of tape and cardboard. And then I experimented with Mod Podge, which is like a shiny, it dries shiny, and then just regular glue. That's kind of like a monochromatic collage too, isn't it? But experiment with different types of adhesives, sewing, taping, different types of glues. That's always an option also. And then finally, again, in our textbook for my Processes and Structures students, if you look at pages 134 to 143, there are lots of other ideas for using fibers and yarns, threads, canvas, burlap, different techniques for including those into your collage. And then for students in my early childhood class, if you go to pages 187 to 189, there's a whole section on collage here. So you can always, you know, look at these examples, and if there's something here that you want to do, then by all means, choose that. Okay, so those are the ideas for collage. Have fun.